Chapter 47. More Tales of the Wheel. Rand paced the dining room, wondering what Fain was telling Moraine. Did he know why the Dark One was after them? Which one of them it was? Perrin sat at the table, pushing crumbs around it, his yellow eyes seeming to look far away. Mat slouched in his chair, a nervous grin on his face as he absently touched his dagger. Lord Agamar was talking with Nynaeve and Egwene. He was a good host and tried to make them forget their troubles. Rand jumped when Nynaeve threw back her head and roared with laughter at something that the Lord had said, and Mat fell off his chair. As he picked himself off the floor, he growled, "Blood and ashes! What's taking her so long?" Agamar looked at him disapprovingly, then returned his attention to the women. Egwene asked why everyone called Lan Daishan. She thought he was only a warder. They talked about a golden crane and sounded as if he were a king. She recalled Moraine calling him the Lord of the Seven Towers. Who is he? Nynaeve was staring into her cup, but it was obvious to Rand that she was listening intently, and he too tried to look as if he wasn't eavesdropping. Agamar told her,
"The Lord of the Seven Towers is an ancient title, Lady Egwene. Not even the High Lords of Tyr have older, though the Queen of Andor comes close. He will not speak of it, yet the story is well known across the borderlands. He is a king, or should have been, a Lan Mandragoran, Lord of the Seven Towers, Lord of the Lakes, crownless king of the Malkieri."
He sounded as proud as a father.
"We of the Shienar call ourselves bordermen, but it's been less than 50 years since we truly were. North of us in Arafel was Malkier. Shienar sent lances north, but it was Malkier that held back the blight. Malkier, peace favour her memory and the light illumine her name."
When Nynaeve remarked that Lan was from Malkier, Agamar told her,
"Yes, Lady Nynaeve. He is the son of Alakir Mandragoran, last crowned king of the Malkieri. It began with Lane, the king's brother, who on a day led his lances through the blight to the blasted lands, perhaps to Shaiel Ghul itself. Lane's wife, Brian, made the day in envy of the fact that Alakir was made king instead of Lane. The brothers were as close as twins, even after the royal Al was added to Akir's name. Lane was acclaimed for his deeds, but he could not outshine Alakir, who was a man and king such as comes once in 100 years. Peace favour him and Eliana. Lane died in the blasted lands, with most of those who followed, men Malkier could ill afford to lose. Brian blamed the king, and said that Shaiel Ghul could have fallen if Alakir had led the rest of Malkier with him. In revenge she plotted with Cowin Gamalan, called Cowin Fairheart, to seize the throne for her son Isam. Fairheart was a hero, almost as well loved as the king, as well as a great lord. Only 2 votes kept him from being the king, and he never forgot that stood between his colours lying on the crowning stone. Brian and Cowin had men moved back from the blight to seize the 7 towers, stripping the border forts to bare garrisons. But Cowin's betrayal ran deeper. He was a dark friend. With the border forts weakened, Trollocs poured into Malkier like a flood. Alakir may have rallied the land with Lane at his side, but Lane's doom had shaken the people, and the Trolloc invasion broke their spirit and will to resist. Overwhelming numbers pushed the Malkieri back into the heartland. Brian fled with the infant Isam, and was overrun by Trollocs as she rode south. No one knows their fate for a certainty, but it can be guessed. When Cowin's treachery was revealed, he was captured by the young Jane Charon, already known as Jane Farstrider. When he was brought to the 7 towers in chains, the great lords called for his head on a pike. Instead, Alakir faced him in single combat and killed Cowin, weeping as he did for the loss of his friend to the Shadow and the fate of Malkier. There was no time to gather aid from Shienar or Arafel, and with 5,000 of the lances dead in the blasted lands, the border forts were overrun. Alakir and his queen Eliana had Lan brought to them in his cradle and placed the sword of Malkieri kings into his infant hands. He carries it today, a weapon made by Aes Sedai during the War of Power. They anointed his head with oil, naming him Daishan, a diademed battle-lord, and consecrated him as the next king of the Malkieri. In his name they swore the ancient oaths of the Malkieri kings and queens, to stand against the Shadow so long as iron is hard and stone abides, to defend the Malkieri while one drop of blood remains, to avenge what cannot be defended. Eliana placed her locket around her son's neck, and he was given over to 20 of the king's bodyguard, their best and deadliest fighters. They were commanded to carry the child to Fal Maran. Alakir and Eliana led the Malkieri to face the Shadow one last time. They died at Herod's Crossing. The Malkieri died and the 7 towers were broken. The other borderland nations arrived and threw back the Shadowspawn at the Stair of Jahan, but most of Malkier remained in Trolloc hands. Year by year, the blight grew until it consumed. Only 5 of the bodyguards arrived at Falmaran, all of them injured, but the infant was well and unharmed. From the cradle he was taught weapons and about the blight, where other children learn of toys and songs. There was nothing left to defend, but he can avenge it. He denies all his titles, but in the borderlands he is known as the Uncrowned, and if he ever raised the golden crane of Malkier, an army would come to follow, but he will not lead men to their deaths. In the blight he courts death like a suitor courting a maiden. If you must enter the blight, I can think of no better man to lead you through. He is the best of the warders, so that means he is the best of the best. You should leave the boys here for a little seasoning, and put all your trust in Lan. The blight is no place for an untrained boy.
Matt made to object, but Rand silenced him with a look. Nynaeve and Egwene were wide-eyed at the tale. The younger girl put her arm on the Wisdom's with a sympathetic look. Moraine appeared with Lan at her heels, and Nynaeve turned her back on them. As Rand demanded what Fain had said, Agamar chided him for rudeness, then asked the same but politely. Moraine told them that Fain is mad, as a servant brought water for her to wash in. As she cleansed herself, she told them that he is worse than vile. She has never met someone so debased. She feels soiled just by touching him. The degradation of his soul makes her doubt he still has one. There is something worse than being a dark friend about him. Egwene murmured about him looking so pitiful. She remembers him arriving each spring, laughing and full of news. Is there any hope for him? No man can stand in the shadow so long he cannot find the light again. Moraine said that she'd always believed that, but Fain had been a dark friend for over 40 years, and what he has done would freeze their hearts to hear. Among the least, he brought the Trollocs to Emond's Field. Egwene gasped, but Rand said yes to himself. It made sense. He should have realized that when he recognized him. Matt asked if he brought any here, and he stayed around the room shivering. Rand thought it was a murderer he was looking for, not Trollocs. Walls had not stopped them before. Agamar said that if he has, they will break their teeth on Faldara's defences. He explained that every street and alley is commanded to be fully lit at night, and no man may hide their face to let a fade sneak by. Egwene asked why Fain would do that, and Moraine sat with a sigh and began to explain. 3 years ago, while I was still planning in Tar Valon, Fain began hunting you for the Dark One. Rand exclaimed that Fain has been coming to the Two Rivers for far longer than that, and never even looked at them twice before last year. Moraine silenced him to continue. He told me almost everything. I believe he managed to hold some things back, though. 3 years ago, a half-man came to him while he was in Mirandy. Fain was terrified, but it is considered a great honour amongst dark friends to be summoned so. He was brought north to Shai Gul, where he met a man with eyes of fire and named himself Baalzaman. Matt and Rand shifted uncomfortably, but Perrin just stared at the Aes Sedai as if nothing surprised him. Agamar exclaimed,
The light protect us!
Moraine said that Fain did not like what was done to him, and had screamed often of fire and burning. Bringing it all out of him almost killed him, and even with her healing he is a shattered ruin. It will take time to make him whole, but she will make the effort, as much to find out what he still hides. He'd been chosen because of where he did his peddling, not just the Two Rivers at the time. The Father of Lies knew roughly where to look, but had little more idea than she did in Tar Valon. Fain had been made into the Dark One's hound and was set to hunt, changing him so he could carry it out. It is those changes he does not wish to remember. He hates his master so much for what was done to him, as much as he fears him. Fain was sent hunting amongst the villages of Baerlon, the Mountains of Mist, and down into the Two Rivers. Perrin broke in to say that he remembered Fain arriving late that spring, and then he lingered a whole week, yet complained of the cost of the inn. Matt chipped in to say everyone wondered if he was sick or fallen for a local woman. Moraine picked up the story and told them that when Fain returned to Shai Gul, his mind was distilled, and his next visit he was able to pick his targets more clearly. In a certainty that surprised even the Dark One, Fain became sure his target was within Emond's Field. Perrin grunted and Matt began cursing, uncaring of the glares of Nynaeve and Lord Agamar. Rand felt a deep chill, thinking of the Dark One hunting him for 3 years. Moraine raised her voice to continue, that when Fain returned to Lugard, Baalzaman came to him in a dream. Fain abased himself and performed rites that would strike them deaf to hear, binding himself further to the Dark One. What is done in dreams can be more dangerous than what is done awake. He was promised rewards, power over kingdoms after Baalzaman's victory, and told to mark the free when he returned to Emond's Field. A half-man would be waiting there with Trollocs, who they now know have come through the Waygate in Manetheren. Loyal murmured it was the most beautiful grove save for Tarvalon's. Manetheren is remembered fondly by the Ogier. Moraine then advised Agamar that the waygate of Mafal to Daranal should be walled up and guarded. She will show him how to find it. The Fades haven't yet learnt all the routes of the ways, but it is only a few miles south of Faldara. Agamar was shaken.
South? Peace! We don't need that. The lights shine on us, it shall be done.
Perrin asked if Fain followed them through the ways, and Moraine nodded. She told them Fain would follow them into the grave because he must. When the Myrddraal failed at Emmett's Field, it brought Fain with the Trollocs on their trail. It forced Fain to run with the Trollocs, and they carried him when his feet gave out. They argued about the best way to cook him, and Fain claims to have turned his heart against the Dark One before they reached the Tarran. They then used the closest waygate in the Mountains of Mist, and sent Fain out alone. He thought he was free, but when he reached Baerlon, a different fate found him. It made him sleep doubled in a Trolloc cookpot, to remind him of the price of failure. It used him to track them to Shadar Logoth, and her illusion of a trail fooled the Fades, but not Fain. The half-men didn't believe him, and dragged him on a leash. Only when they couldn't find the group did some of the Fades begin to credit him, and those 4 returned to Arador. Fain claims it was Baalzaman himself who drove the Fades into Shadar Logoth. Agamar shook his head, and said Fain must be mad. If Heartsbane is loose, they would be dead by now or worse. Moraine told him that Fain spoke the truth as he saw it. He could not lie to her. He said Baalzaman appeared, flickering like a candle, and smote a Fade with the fires of his eyes. Lan said something must have driven the Fades into Shadar Logoth, a place they fear as much as they fear the Dark One, and Agamar grunted and looked sick. The Aes Sedai continued to say that Fain described the Trollocs being decimated by Mashadar, including the one that held his leash. He fled the city as if it were the pit of doom in Shayol Ghul. He thought he was free again, and intended to run, but to his horror he discovered the compulsion to hunt the boys had not gone. In fact, it grew stronger, until he could not rest unless he dropped from exhaustion, and ate only what scraps he could scavenge. When he reached Caemlyn, he could feel his quarry was within a mile. Even here in the cells he would look up in the direction of this room. Rand felt a sudden itch between his shoulder blades, as if he could feel Fain's eyes on him. Moraine went on, that Fain was half mad when he realised only 2 of the 3 boys were in Caemlyn, when he was compelled to find them all. He screamed when the waygate opened, and the knowledge of how to do it came into his mind, though he doesn't know how. His hands moved of their own accord, and when the owner of the shop came down to investigate the noise, Fain murdered him, out of envy that the man could walk away where he could not. Egwene surmised that it was Fain that was following them through the ways, then asked how he escaped the Black Wind. It was right behind them. Moraine answered that the Black Wind caught Fain, who claimed to understand the voices. Some greeted him and others feared him, and then the wind released him. Loyal rumbled to the light to preserve them, and Moraine agreed. There is much about Padan Fain she must learn. The evil is deeper and stronger in him than any man she has ever met. When she asked him about the Eye of the World, he stopped talking, but she felt there was knowledge behind his silence. Agamar said he will have the information extracted from Fain. He has no mercy for Dark Friends. It would be worth them delaying a day if they can get more information. Battles have been lost for not knowing what the enemy intended. Moraine shook her head and told him that if not for the need of sleep, she would leave immediately. 3 years ago, the Dark One had the capacity to have Fain brought to Shayol Ghul to touch him. 1 year ago, he could touch Fain in his dreams, and this year, he can touch the dreams of those who walk in the light, and appear, albeit with difficulty, at Shadar Logoth. It may have only been a projection, but it poses more of a danger than all the Trolloc hordes combined. The seals on Shayol Ghul are weakening. There is no time. Agamar bowed his head in acceptance, then told Moraine that he understands his attack on Tywin's Gap will only be a diversion. Yet his diversion will be meaningless if they lose their battle at the Eye. He implored her to leave the boys and take real soldiers in their stead. Moraine told him it must be the boys and no one else. They are the ones who will fight the battle at the Eye. Agamar's jaw dropped, and he stared at the boys and took a step back, groping for a sword he was not wearing. He said to Moraine,
"They aren't. You are not Red Ajah, Moraine Sedai, but surely not even you would."
He began to sweat until she soothed him by telling him they are Taviran. The pattern weaves itself around them. Already the Dark One had tried to kill each of them more than once. 3 Taviran in one place are enough to change the life around them as a whirlpool. When that place is the Eye of the World, the pattern may weave the Father of Lives into itself and make him harmless again. Agamar was still doubtful and asked if she was sure. He only sees farm boys. She told him that the old blood of Manetheren is strong in almost all of them. Does he doubt the strength of that blood? Rand glanced at the Aes Sedai. He caught the fact she hadn't said that all 3 were Manetheren's blood. He caught Nynaeve's attention and she shook her head, indicating she hadn't told Moraine anything. Agamar agreed that he would not doubt that blood. If anyone could bring down the Dark One, it would be Manetherin's. Moraine insisted that they retire for the night. They have to leave early, though the 3 boys must sleep close to her. Time is too short to let the Dark One interfere with them. Rand felt the Aes Sedai's eyes on him and shivered under her weighing gaze.
Thanks for listening. Please like, share and subscribe and help get a new channel off the ground. Thank you.